Good morning to all of you. We thank you immensely for your presence. I'm part of the Cinema Club Committee of Latin American Network of Art History Students, and I am pleased to start this talk as part of the meetings of the month of November. Today, we have the illustrious participation of Mr. Rüdiger Suchsland, who will give us a rich discussion on historiography and biography, with special focus on the history of silent film and secret black hours approaches to cinema. We inform that this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel with the understanding that all persons present see image rights. This event is scheduled to last approximately 1.5 hours. We will begin with a brief introduction of the guest and committee's activities, followed by the conversation with Mr. Suchsland. At the end, we will open for questions and discussion. We invite everyone to bring questions, references, and comments on Latin American cinema to enrich the dialogue. We would like to express our sincerest thanks to colleagues of the LEHA Network's Cine Club Committee for their collaboration in the realization of this event, which is part of the series of meetings on cinema, starting with with films such as Barravento and Patio by director Glover Rocha, Pacing Through Chiquiago by Antonio Eguino, and our most recent session discussion, Fire of Love, from Zaragoza, who connected for a few minutes to greet us. We thank her for her participation, for your participation, and also in the meetings and her essential support in the consolidation of this collaboration. We remind you that in the Cine Club Committee meetings, we use both Portuguese and Spanish for communication, so feel free to use the language you feel more comfortable with. In addition, today we will have a simultaneous translation from English to Spanish so that we can chat clearly and calmly with Mr. Suchsland. If in doubt, we have colleagues available to help with translations into all of these languages as well. Thank you. The Latin American Art History Students Network is a non-profit organization formed by undergraduate and graduate students in art history that seeks to build a platform for dialogue and joint actions at the Latin American level. Siguiente, amigo, por favor. Since the beginning of thank you. Of 2020, the organization is formed by students from 28 universities in 11 Latin American countries. It is characterized as horizontal, voluntary, and participative. The activities of the LEHA network can be followed through our Instagram, accessible through the QR code displayed in the projection. Amigos, muito obrigado. The Cine Club Committee is linked to the Latin American Network of Art History Students, founded in April 2021, currently coordinated in collective management by Casey Oliveira. The Film Committee of the LEHA Network aims to organize periodic virtual meetings once a month for the open discussion of audiovisual works, mainly from Latin America. The meeting will be held through the Google Meet platform, or in this case, Zoom, with at least 2 mediators, and will count on the participation and contribution of all the members of the meeting. Those interested only need to register through a form, which will be published mainly on Red LEHA's Instagram page, along with the promotional material of the meeting, so that they will receive the link to the meeting and the film, which will be sent by Cine Club email for the participants' email up to a week before the meeting. Our main event is the Cine Club, but we are open to suggestions for other events proposals that the Cine Red LEHA committee may organize. Siguiente, amigo, por favor. Muito obrigado. We have a flexible and multidisciplinary working group that works flexibly according to interests and activities. Our committee is integrated by students from all over Latin America and works in both Spanish and Portuguese, languages that enrich our exchange and help us to adopt learning routes and understanding of the cultural plurality of our America. Siguiente, amigo, por favor. Muito obrigado. We could introduce to Isha now. Its roots go back from 1989, when the Iron Curtain that had divided Europe for more than 40 years began to fall. In this climate of rapid political change, a group of Hungarian students took the initiative and started contacting their colleagues in different countries. They wanted to found an association that would enable students of history to get in touch, cooperate and exchange ideas, something that had not been possible until then. On May 9, 1990, ISHA was founded in Budapest with a large student conference. Such events continue to be held every year, along with different types of smaller seminars, regional activities and projects. In 1999, the first issue of ISHA's academic journal Carnival was published. In subsequent years, ISHA's international secretariat moved 3 times, first from Hungarian capital to Leuven, Belgium, then to Zurich, Switzerland, and finally to Berlin, Germany, where it is still based today. After more than 25 years of existence, ISHA has members throughout Europe and is working to expand to other continents. Thank you, amigo. Muito obrigado. Today's meeting with Mr. Rüdiger Suchsland excites us because of his background and interest in learning about his experience, study, and perspective of film. He studied history and philosophy in Munich. After graduating, he worked as a freelance journalist, especially for various cultural publishers. Since 1998, he has been mainly active in the field of film criticism. Among other things, he has worked as an author for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the Sciendienst, Telepolis, den Deutschlandfunk, Die Welt, the Frankfurter Rundschau, the Berliner Zeitung, the Jewish General, and Rolling Stone. Since 1997, he has been editor of Arteschock. From 1998 to 2004, he assisted at the Films Munich, and since then also at the Mannheim-Heidelberg Film Festival and the German Film Festival. He sits on the advisory board of the German Film Critics Association. His written works are translated on this slide into English, but can be found on this Wikipedia profile. Thank you, amigo. Muito obrigado. Você realizar esta presentação, ler este slide, por favor.
César Augusto Duque Sánchez, graduado em 2013, maestro 2016 y enseñante de pregrado Universidad de los Andes 2013-2015 y Universidad del Rosario 2017, actualidad. Investigador sobre los temas teoría psicosocio, histórico, genética y de la cultura, historiografía, historia de las ciencias con énfasis en las ciencias sociales, Big History, con énfasis en teoría e historiografía del arte en la cultura. Colaborador externo de Network of Consulting Historians, Universidad de Groningen, Grupo de Gran Historia, Universidad de Oviedo y de la Red Iberoamericana de Historia y de la Historiografía, investigador asociado a International Network of Theory of History y miembro del grupo anarquismo Ciencias Sociales de los comités de historiografía y cineclubes de la Red Latinoamericana de Estudiantes de Historia del Arte.
Muito obrigado, meu amigo. Irene Sofia
Eh,
Cast... Ay, disculpe.
Irene Sofía Castillo Maldonado. Irene Sofía estudia Historia del Arte, Museología, Estudios Latinoamericanos de Gestión de Empresas sin fines de lucro en la Universidad de Pittsburgh, Pensilvania. En ese momento investiga los monumentos coloniales en Pittsburgh, que documenta la colonización de su país, Puerto Rico. Ahora mismo trabaja como periodista para el periódico de su universidad, como crítica del arte. Es gestora cultural para la Asociación Latina y miembro de los esfuerzos de equidad, diversidad e inclusión de su universidad. Para Red LEHA participa como coordinadora y fiscalizadora de los comités de arte americana, condiciones de trabajo y arte caribe.
Thank you so much, my friend. Uh, okay, Irene holds a master's degree. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I understood. I understood.
I'm so sorry. Ah, Irene, I'm so sorry. Sergio, Sergio, do you like that? I present to you. Uh, are you are muted. Estás en silencio, amigo. Estás en silencio. Ay,
Bom, voy a decir en portugués. Sí. Bom, eu sou Sérgio César Júnior, sou graduado em História, mestre em História e sou doutorando em História da Arte pela Universidade Federal de São Paulo. Sou especialista na área de estudos visuais, cultura visual. Sou também, faço parte do grupo Red LEHA, faço parte do grupo Mar, que é o grupo de História da Arte da Universidade Federal de São Paulo, e também do grupo Warburg e Renascimentos, também da Universidade Federal de São Paulo. Então, meus estudos estão voltados à imagem, estão voltados também aos estudos de imagens pictóricas, fotográficas, audiovisual, a minha especialidade maior em audiovisual, e com especialidade no cinema brasileiro e latino-americano, de países hispânicos, e agora estou me especializando também na França americana, no caso da Martinica, estudando o filme Ricas Negre, e no Brasil, A Deusa Negra, do Olá Balogun. E esse é um dos estudos feitos durante esse processo de especialização em história, cinema, história da arte, imagens, cultura visual e estudos visuais.
Beleza, amigo. Muito obrigado. Well, we then we'll begin our interview with Mr. Rüdiger Suchsland, and we have a first question from Ford. Um, then recently, Mr. Rüdiger, there has been a regrettable increase in the election of ultra-right parties in several countries in Europe. It is a phenomenon that started with the Golden Dawn in Greece and has now moved to countries where 20 years ago it would never have been imagined. Uh, we have two questions really to ask you. The first is, can you give us some clues from your experience as historian, director, film critic, and connoisseur of German audiovisual culture as to why Germany is experiencing a resurgence of far-right parties? And is there any explanation about the influence of audiovisual propaganda in this new cycle of the rise of the extreme right at a time when moving images surpass the cinema analyzed by Krakauer? So sorry for the complex questions.
No, it's great. Hello, everyone. First of all, I thank you very much for this invitation. It is for me a very interesting event and an honor to be participant in your meeting and to chat with you, to exchange with you. In my opinion, most important would be the exchange, and as well, yeah, well, to maybe we have different opinions about certain topics, and I will be interested in your contrarian opinions if you have them, because it's for sure and the general topic of this conversation is a very open topic and it has many layers and aspects. So it is not so easy to understand the phenomenons, and as well, it is not so easy to come to the right clues and consequences about it. For sure, we have to deal with here with very open topic. Facts are happening now. History is not just open, history is like the moving image of the cinema, history is moving. And for instance, in less than 1 week, we have the elections in US of America. Irene Sophia will share the experience in Pennsylvania in the tight battleground state. And as well, I guess that most of us hope that Donald Trump will not win the election. But of course, yes, we can do this. But on the other hand, it does not mean that everything will be perfect if Kamala Harris will win. I think we know that. And of course, I try to not to bring too much of my own opinions in the description and in the observation of what I'm talking about. But so I think it is in a way, if we look at the US of America, it is not just about what our personal convictions are and what we are convinced what should happen, and it's not all about our wishes or of our personal utopias. More than that, and you all in Latin America, you know what I'm talking about much better maybe than I do in Germany, that one could question our image of the US of America. One could question the influence, and I don't just mean the political influence, maybe even more the cultural influence of the US of America. Because for all of us, I include myself, I include the German society for sure, but as well for my personal experience in traveling to countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Iran, Turkey, India, Hong Kong. Everywhere you find DVDs on the street. And which films do you find there? You don't find the films of those countries, but you find the newest Hollywood movies. So for sure, Hollywood, and this is just one and maybe the most famous institution of the cultural imperialism of the United States, Hollywood is a tool for convincing the masses of the American way of life. And I think, my personal opinion is that it is as well a very ideological concept. But even when you don't agree it is ideological, one could question why here we have this unilateral image of culture. We have the image that, or the idea that culture should be, that movies should be like American movies. America in their way of storytelling, in their dramaturgy, in their aesthetics, in the way we perceive a movie character, we think about a character, in the idea that a character should develop, should have a journey of the hero, should fall in love, should found a family, should fight for the nation, should be not individualistic, but not egocentric, and many more I could mention. These all are patterns of the American way of seeing the world and seeing life. And I think if we look at movies from, for instance, Latin America, or from Iran, opposition movies, auteur movies, or from Russia, or from France and other European countries, from Japan, for sure, great movies from Japan, we see that this pattern does not rule the world and does not rule the minds of all the filmmakers, but it does rule the minds of a big part of the audience. So this is like a forward I want to give to you. It is not an answering to any of those more than two questions, the first questions, but I think we have to keep in mind, if we are talking about the influence of audio-visual propaganda, and if we are talking about the situation where right-wing parties or far right-wing parties rise in Germany and all over Europe, one has to mention that this does not come out of the blue. It does not fall from the moon. The right-wing guys, like the Nazis in Germany in the early 30s, were no aliens landing with a spaceship. They are coming out of the society, and they are coming out of a certain historic and, of course, economic and political situation. And if we have to explain what is happening and why it is happening, we should think about there's more than one reason for it, and we have to look very closely. There are no easy answers. And the idea which the critical theory, the Frankfurt School, had in the 20s and started to develop, starting from the 20s until, in a way, until our times today, but of course, first of all, until the 50s and 60s, when all those famous first-generation people from the Frankfurt School died, with one exception or two exceptions. Horkheimer died in beginning of the 70s, and Leo Löwenthal, who is a scientist, one of the big people of the first generation. He died in the early 90s. And he is quite interesting for us because he's not so well known like Adorno or Benjamin, but he is a person who wrote a whole study about the right wing, the rise of the right wing and the influence of mass media. So in a way, he's in the footsteps, you might say, of Krakauer's and of Benjamin's ideas. So what is the situation when the Frankfurt School developed their ideas and their new ideas, and why did they do it? The general, you might say, the general thought of Siegfried Krakauer, which he developed in his book From Caligari to Hitler, you have it here in the footnotes. It is written in 47, but many of the general ideas and as well some passages about movies have been written before. The general idea of that is that cinema is an art for the masses, and therefore it is a kind of reflection or a seismograph of the cultural and political subconsciousness of a society. So the Frankfurt School connects, to make it very short, connects ideas which come out of the psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud, together with ideas which come out of Marxist, and not just Marxist, more about general economics of around the fin de siècle, around 1900. So besides Marx and the Marxists, we should think about Max Weber, about Emil Durkheim, about, of course, Georg Simmel. I hope you know Simmel, Philosophy of Money. He is a main book he wrote, but Simmel, who was the teacher of Krakauer, is very important as well as an essayist, like Krakauer. Maybe one could say that the most important texts of Krakauer are not the very thick books, but the small essays, like on the ornament of masses, and like about the audience for cinema in the 20s, but this would mean to go too much into detail now. The general idea, as I said, is that movies tell us something about what is happening in society and what the people of the society are not aware of. So, and why has cinema this privileged position within the other arts? There is a very simple reason: because cinema is sold to the masses. Cinema has a bigger audience. Cinema is expensive. So for the cinema makers, even if you are an auteur director, you will have a much bigger audience than you would have in painting an image, a picture, or in, for instance, in writing a novel, or for sure directing a ballet. So, or a theater piece. In a theater, you have, let's say, for 10 evenings, you have, or let's say for 100 evenings, you have 200 people in the theater. So this means 100 evenings, 20,000. But with a movie, you have easily 20,000, at least in a country like Germany. You have quite often 100,000, and for many films, 100,000 people in the cinema are considered to be not a success. For an auteur film, it is okay, but 200,000 would be better. A real success would start with 500,000. And if we think on Hollywood movies, of course, they cost much more. They have to earn millions, $100 million. A success would be to sell 200 million tickets or something like this in the world. And if we look at the big movies, some of you might have seen it, Joker 2. Joker 2 is a film which is considered to be not success, a failure, because it has 100 millions of audience, but not enough. I think it has something like 120 million so far. It will have a bit more, but it won't reach 200 million, so it's considered to be a failure. So very simple. If you do a movie for a world audience, for a global audience, you have to think about what is happening in the brain and in the soul and in the body of the audience. You have to temptate the audience. Therefore, you have to know your audience. And for this reason, cinema is only successful, and even the less successful films, they try to reach a big audience. So cinema is much closer to the masses, and as well, cinema is a teamwork. Usually it's not one director sitting in his dark office and doing a movie alone. Even Godard did not do it like that. Sometimes he was close to it, but most directors, they work with a team and with a producer who even thinks a bit more to the money, and they have to get film funds and so on. So to make a long story short, cinema is reflecting what is happening in a society, and quite often it can work as a tool to the subconsciousness. So cinema is like a psychoanalyst who is putting the society on the couch. And if we look in retrospect to movies, we can see certain events, certain developments. And Krakauer, in his study about Weimar cinema, with the title From Caligari to Hitler, he was doing this about the Weimar cinema. And of course, one could argue that it is very simple in the year 1947 to tell, okay, Hitler came to power in 1933, and we can see this in the movies. But this is just the simplest version of the Krakauer idea. A bit more elaborated version is that Krakauer shows that in certain movies, like the movie The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I will show you at least a little bit about it. I don't have slides, but I can show you this image out of the Caligari movie, for example. And I can show you some images out of this book, which is the best in images about other films. So in certain films, here, for instance, you see Brigitte Helm, which is later the Metropolis girl. So in those films, Krakauer shows, in analyzing the films, that Hitler is already there before anyone knew who is Hitler. And I could, if I had more time, I could tell you a lot about why I think this is true, and this is a good analysis of it. Later, I will come to our times, and I tell you what is already there in our times in contemporary cinema. But this is my cliffhanger. Let's wait a moment. To answer your questions, I tried to make this very short and not to talk too long. I start with the second question. Is there any explanation about the influence of audiovisual propaganda? I think, first of all, the explanation is very simple. It is the flood of images. It is the fact that we all are in social networks, and the social networks are an image network. And even, of course, words are important, books are important, but the people read less and less books, and they read less and less the whole book. They scroll through a book. If it's an ebook, it's much easier, or we all know those pages where we can download a whole library on PDF for free. And many people are doing this, I know, in Latin America for sure, and as well in Germany. And so what are we doing? If we want, this is the elaborated Wikipedia version of the minor school students in university. We don't copy-paste Wikipedia, but we scroll through PDFs with the search function. We search for Krakauer, we search for Hitler, and then we find many sentences in 20 books, and we have great ideas. But the fact is that it is a more superficial way, and it is a more subconscious way. I would argue that even those texts are images. But for sure, in cinema, if we think for a moment about Jean-Luc Godard's last films, and even in early films like Le Mépris, what is the English title of it? I have to think for a moment. It is the movie with Brigitte Bardot and Michel Piccoli. I check for it, what is the English title, but Le Mépris by Godard, even there we can see that words are formed into images. The words and the sentences in Godard's movies are colored. Sometimes they are red and blue and white, like the tricolor, or they are, yeah, Contempt, that's it. Contempt is the title of the Le Mépris. And in his last films, like Le Livre d'Images, the image book, he was even more mixing images of films, of moving images. Sometimes he took photos of these images, of the moving images, and connected it in a way which were more close to, for instance, Chris Marker's essays. And then he was, for example, taking one sentence of, let's say, Hegel or Marx, sometimes as well Nietzsche, or I don't know, Jean-Luc Godard, sometimes from himself, a sentence which were wandering through the image, or they were just in letters or in single words. Of course, we could read them, but in the same moment, they have a visual effect. So even in a very essayist and complicated and Protestant filmmaker who is much into words, the image is primary. It is more important than words. And for sure, in all Hollywood films and in most films which are made for the masses, the images are more important, even when the words go with the image parallel and explain what we see. And quite often there is no distance between words and images, so the words support the images, but the images are primary. And even more, we have this in the news, in the television, or we have this in, of course, in all social networks. One could mention Instagram or Facebook or all the others. So we have the general flood and overflooding of visual propaganda, of images, and it's audiovisual, yes, but the audio means sometimes words, sometimes music. Quite often, the audio means as well the sound atmosphere. And if we would analyze a movie, I would always recommend not just to analyze the dialogues and the words which make sense, but as well to analyze parallel to the dialogue level, the music level, and then the sound level, which is sometimes just some white noise, which we cannot really decipher, but which gives an idea of us feeling us good or feeling us bad, and all that. So the images are the most important, and not just for the ultra-right, not just for the far-right, for all. All political and cultural communication is an image communication, and we know the term visual turn to dense it into one word, what is happening. And if we look at two recent events in one event is, of course, the massacre of the 7th October when the Hamas attacked Israeli kibbutz. The most interesting thing of this whole event, and I tried to analyze it just as an act of image. Let's not go too much into the political, it's a long story and we could talk for hours about that. But I think it was one of the first time when attackers, terrorists, had a cell phone with them, and they were schooled before. They were trained in using their own cell phone, in producing images. And as well, they were trained in hacking the cell phones of the victims and filming them and sending all those images and small films to friends and family of the victims. And of course, not just to friends and family, and not just to the Israeli people, but into the whole world, to make the images global. So it was not just about, of course, it was as well about killing more than 1,000 people, but it was much more about sending a message out into the world to much more than 1,000 people. And it would be very interesting to analyze what exactly this message was. But let's stay just to the fact that they had weapons with them, but the most important weapon was the camera, was the cell phone, where machines able to produce images. So definitely, this was an act of audiovisual propaganda. And if we look at the Ukraine war, for example, we can see that we have a kind of, how can I put it? We have a kind of race between the official sources, the governments of Russia and of Ukraine, and the journalists, which are the official journalists. Normally they are banned from the battlefield. They are not allowed to show any images. But we have this phenomenon of so-called war bloggers, military bloggers. As well, you know that the troops who have their cell phones, but they are not allowed to use their cell phones. And in the beginning of the war, it was quite often happening that people were killed because they were calling their mother or they were calling home and they were producing images. They were online, and immediately the enemy could see, okay, here are troops, and fired at them. So we have the phenomenon that on the one hand we have a flood of images from different sources, and we have a kind of empowerment from an individual citizen, the individual soldier and the non-professional person who becomes a journalist of war in the same moment when the professional journalists are banned, or either banned or embedded. Embedded means controlled by the governments. And we have this on both sides in this war. And so we have in both cases, in the Middle East wars now and in the Ukraine war, we have different perspective of images and no truth, because we know that the images from the Israelis and as well the images of the Hamas, of the Arabs, are controlled by certain politicians. And maybe in Israel it's a bit easier that you have opposition images coming out. In Gaza, it is absolutely not possible, or you risk your life. If one of the Arab citizens disagree with Hamas and wants to tell his truth, it is life-threatening to send out images from different opinion in Gaza. So if we just have this situation, which means a boom, a flood of audiovisual propaganda, we can see that this is not just connected to the ultra-right, to the extreme right. But the extreme right, of course, is using this situation, which is connected to an empowerment of the, as I said before, of the ordinary citizen, of the people as individuals. And so we have as well in the democratic, more or less democratic societies of Europe, we have a kind of counter press. We don't have any more media which are kind of course we have mainstream media, but the media do not control the mainstream, those mainstream media. And we have a big decline due to economic reasons of papers, newspapers. We have less decline in radio and TV, but even in radio and TV, we have, besides the public TV and the private big chains controlled by big trusts and media, quite often global media trusts, we have all those small bloggers putting out their personal podcast. And we have all those small, one could not call them TV channels, but the kind of, let's say, visual channels. And this is the situation where we have, first of all, much more difference in opinions and in images and in narration of a certain event. Whatever happens, let's say an election in Germany, we have the different interpretations. And so there is much more feeding to counter mainstream opinions, which are as well far right, a lot of far right, sometimes as well far left, but much less, most of all far right opinions and far right narrations. And some of them one could decipher, because the right-wing parties in Europe, like maybe as well in Latin America, are not, they don't always share the same opinion. They are diverse as well. And we have, for sure, two different ways of very right-wing parties. We have a neoliberal, market liberal, and in a way globalist right. And we have an identity politics, a nationalist, ultra-nationalist right, which calls itself ethno-pluralist in Europe. Ethno-pluralism, which is a term for, let's say, each national state is formed by different tribes and different nations. It's like a tribe image, and each tribe should stick to itself. So one part of the ultra-right, they want a kind of globalist empire of big state and big economy and power, of course, imperialist, nationalist power, but Europe should rule, or Germany should rule, and they should be more powerful than the United States and maybe colonize the United States one day, but let's start with Eastern Europe. That's the general idea. And on the other hand, we have this nationalist, right extremist people who say kind of, we should go out of the world. We should, in best, have a German national state on the moon or on the Mars without anyone else. And all the others should leave the country. The borders should be closed as well for economics, because economy for the right wing means Jewish Wall Street, American imperialism, and so on. And Chinese, they don't like the Chinese either. Most what they like are the Russians from Putin, because he is as well a strong leader, and those right-wing people love the strong leaders, so on. And this is the situation where we have this kind of propaganda, and the propaganda is not uniform. It is diverse in the messages, which is a good thing, because so far it does not exist one big right-wing narration and not one big right-wing leader. There is no new Hitler so far in Germany. And there is as well no Marine Le Pen. You know, the French leader of the ultra-right is Marine Le Pen, is a woman. There is no character which is of the same, which has the same respect and which has the same charismatic effect so far. But this could happen and could change very fast. So to say at least a little bit about the first question, which are the reasons? The reasons, of course, are, first of all, insecurity. It's a decline, an economic and political decline of Europe. And the political parties of the center and of the center left and center right, they don't have good answers to it. And some of them might have good answers, but they are not able to communicate these answers to society, and they are not able to form coalitions which at least in a way agree on the most important points. For instance, if you talk to economic leaders in Germany, they will tell you we need a social ecologic transformation. Social economic transformation means to go away from the classic fuel and the carbon-based energy, and to change it into electric energy, which comes out in most European countries out of sun and wind and atomic plants. In Germany, as Germany is very skeptic, if not more than skeptic, kind of panicking against everything which has to do with atomic energy. We don't have any more atomic energy. Paradoxically, we buy a lot of atomic energy from France, from Belgium, and from other countries. This is the kind of double bind situation. Germany is a rich country. We prefer to keep our hands clean of atomic energy and pay a lot of money to buy atomic energy from other countries. So, but this is just a side remark. This social ecologic transformation, everyone would agree on that it is necessary. But in Germany, it takes a long time to do this into practice, to form it into practice. In Germany, we have a lot of bureaucracy, and we have a democracy, which is good, but the democracy is very federal, which means it's not just one parliament. We have the parliament and the federal government, yes, but we have as well smaller federal states, and those states have to say yes as well. And then we have the power of the cities, we have the power of the parties, which means each decision takes a very long time. And of course, we don't want, in a dictatorship, it is very fast, but we don't want a dictatorship. So the challenge for the democratic parties and institutions is to make the decision process faster without killing democracy. And they are working on that. And the term social ecologic transformation is, let's say, the key term for this. But if you talk to a German citizen and mention social ecologic transformation, 80% at least would take these words as a threat, because ecology for them means everything is becoming more expensive, and transformation is meaning things will change to the worse. And it means as well inflation, things are becoming more expensive. It means that you maybe have to change your job, or the conditions of the job will be less agreeable and less nice than they used to be. It means digitalization, so they have to buy new TV screens, new heating, new cars, and all that. They don't want it. And as well, transformation, like the word rationalization in the neoliberalist time. Yeah, rationalization is, in fact, if you take the term literal, a very good thing. You make things more rational. But in fact, rationalization meant a kind of losing the jobs, more controlling, more rule of the managers, less social rights. Efficiency, which is efficient for the big companies and not efficient for the citizen. So what the parties from center right to center left are working on now is better words for selling the same content, because the content ecology and transformation, everyone agrees we need it, but they don't like the words, and they don't like all the impact which is coming with the words. And I will give you just one last clue for it. It is the good old-fashioned word of progress and future. All the political parties of the democratic center in Germany, and I think as well in other European countries, have no idea of progress anymore. And they don't have any idea of future anymore. For them, future is like, let it be like it is. They are afraid that things are becoming worse. And the best result would be that things are not becoming worse. But there is no longer existing any idea of things becoming better. Becoming better for at least, let's say, 40% of the citizens. I'm not talking about the whole society. I'm not talking about the mass. But the problem now is that things are becoming worse, and they are trying to prevent this. And this is the only goal. So all center and all democratic parties are becoming conservative in the way that they conserve the conditions of life and the political and institutional and economic conditions. And but the idea of progress is not existing today. It existed in the 60s and 70s for sure. And but no one anymore believes to progress. And my personal opinion is that this is a result of the general postmodern thinking, which has kind of given up the modernist thinking, which had to do with modernization and progress, as well progress for the masses, progress for the society as a whole, not just for small classes of the rich and educated people. But in this moment, I think the biggest challenge would mean to develop a new idea of progress, and maybe, or not maybe, and a new idea of future. And of course, a substantial idea. So not just a PR word, a substantial idea where there is a chance that people believe in it. So this is, and because we don't have this idea, we see the rise of the far-right parties. The rise of the far-right parties, to say this again, have to do with insecurity and with the ideas that if things change, they will become worse. So please, no change. And a little bit, it is like the fairy tale of the idea we could keep the things like they are, which means enough jobs. We have a good job situation, enough jobs, and the small bar on the corner will exist and will not be replaced by an American coffee shop or by a McDonald's. But I can have my German food at the corner. It will as well not be replaced by a Turkish döner shop or by a Chinese soup shop, which is seen as foreign food of migrants. And of course, the right-wing people they hate most migrants. They are anti-migrant. But many people, even in the center, they are not anti-migrant, but they fear a social change, which is coming with globalization. And the change is the daily life conditions. The food is becoming more expensive, energy is becoming more expensive, and German energy and cars are replaced by foreign energy and cars. And German food is replaced by Chinese or Turkish or Italian food. And they love their pizza, they love their döner if they have as well the German bar on the corner. But the fact is that due to economic crisis, in many cities, smaller cities, there are just very few German bars on the corner left. And of course, this German bar for me is a symbol. It's only a symbol to make a complicated story more easy to understand and to talk about. So sorry for my very long discourse, but your questions are like, I don't know, they challenge me and provoke a long answer.
No, thanks, dear Mr. Rüdiger. Thank you very much for such an extraordinary analysis. Wonderful. I think this allows us to move on to the next question. Extraordinary analysis. I think our conversations has gone on very well in English. So we would like to say that we will continue in English. Our friend Irene will be joining class now, for which we thank her very much for, and we will continue with our next question. And we send the best wishes for she. Many thanks. Now, the next question is about a concrete film from Alexander Sokhirov as a symptom from this situation that you analyzed through Krakauer's complete and integrated variables to explain this canon of films that locate Hollywood's cinema in the scene of film as art of masses. I would like to ask you to change the subject now. Then this is to analyze this movie in 2022, Alexander Sakharov's film, which uses deepfakes to place the actions of Mussolini, Churchill, Stalin, and Hitler on the same symbolic plane, also within a Christian order. In a purgatory, was released to the public. The film allows us to understand the crisis of political sense of scarcity of resources to save costs in the film industry, of historical judgment by incurring in a cynical relativism of analytical capacity on the part of the spectators. From your perspective and according to what you have been able to learn from your experience, how are these crises being experienced in today's film industry? Do you think that's something similar to what Krakauer warned in his book From Caligari to Hitler is happening, something like a predominance of economic pressures on the industry, which produces this path towards dangerous directions for the peace of humanity after 1945?
Yes, as well, big questions. First of all, before I come to the film industry, I think we should be careful with those linear explanations, which have a tendency to be too simple, and they can be very easily an excuse for the filmmakers and the film industry. I would prefer to talk about the filmmakers, because film industry is a very broad term. Film industry could mean, let's say, Warner Brothers or Disney, so big companies controlled by the controllers, no longer national, even when they have to fulfill certain national tasks. But a Disney movie does not want to just to sell his new film in the US of America. They want to sell it in the Latin American countries as well, and much more important in China, and through hidden ways and gates as well in Russia, and then in India. And they will change certain scenes. If kissing of two women is not allowed in Indonesia, there will be an Indonesian version. They already produced it before, and they will darken the skin a little bit for the African countries and all those things. So this is one big company which is able to to adapt the products. The film is a product which has to be sold globally, and to adapt it to the different global markets. And on the other hand, we have as well in America the big Hollywood auteur cinema, which is not Disney and Warner, but sometimes it is distributed, let's say, by Warner. But I mean filmmakers like, let's say, Paul Thomas Anderson, let's say Martin Scorsese, and many more. And they have certain artistic freedom. And as well, they are trying to sell their products to a global market, not just to the US of America, but they will not change their movies for each market and adapt it. There will be one movie, and sometimes in China or in Indonesia, certain scenes are edited out of the film, and we can be sure that in the moment the film will be released in the markets, local markets and cinemas, there will be as well the original version on the DVD markets on the street. So this already is difficult to compare. And then, of course, we have film industry means as well the auteur cinema of all the other countries besides the US of America. And there we have, on the one hand, I would not call this auteur cinema the, let's say, art house, wellness art house cinema, which wants to tell stories which are pleasing the audience and not threatening the audience. You have a safe, happy ending. You have a lot of cliches in it. It will be a movie which is made for entertaining the audience, but it is just for an audience sometimes only in France or Germany, sometimes in whole Europe. And the film will have a small release maybe in the United States, but it will not be shown in the Museum of Modern Art because it's not art at all. It will be shown in, let's say, German Film Week in Chicago or something like that. And I'm quite sure those films are usually not shown in a country like Latin American countries or Chinese and East Asian countries. But then we have the auteur cinema of Europe. Godard was someone like it, but today we have in France someone like Leos Carax or Bertrand Bonello. We have in Spain Almodovar. We have in Germany Christian Petzold. Those films will be shown in Cannes or in Venice. Sukhorov, of course, Sukhorov as well, a Russian art house filmmaker who usually has money not from Russia, but from France and from Germany. And those films will be shown in the competitions of the Venice Film Festival or the Cannes Film Festival or Berlin, San Sebastian, Locarno, in the big A festivals. And then after that, they will be shown in Toronto, some of them in MoMA, some of them in FICUNAM in Mexico, and Sao Paulo Film Festival in Bafisi in Buenos Aires, and so on. But as well, then we have the auteur cinemas, more or less auteur cinemas in countries. I'm taking, as I'm talking to Latin American people, I'm taking Latin American examples. Someone like in Argentina, we have, for instance, Lisandro Alonso. He does films which are connected to Argentinian New Wave, which are usually shown in Cannes, which have a European audience. They will have 20 or maybe even 40 European festivals where they will be shown. They earn some money with those European festivals. And then they have as well a connection with Arte, with the European channel, TV channel. So they get some money there, and they will be seen in TV in France, Germany, Spain, Poland, and as well through the internet, it's possible to be seen in other countries. And here you have commissioning editors, like for the European films, of course, but it's something different. If you have a film from Argentina or from Brazil, I don't know about the newest Walter Salles movie, but I know that other filmmakers as well in Brazil and Mexico, they have those connections with European TV channels. Usually it's Arte, sometimes it's Canal Plus. And those commissioning editors, they are on the one hand very open. And the filmmakers from Latin America, they can do a lot of things they want to do. But on the other hand, they have to fulfill certain cliches and ideas and concepts which exist about, let's say, Brazilian cinema, Argentinian cinema. And it's less Colombian, but in Colombian, a film like Monos 2 years ago as well was shown. A Colombian film was shown in Berlinale, and it had a German distributor. And in my opinion, it was a very good film. But as well, it had to show something which is, let's say, a kind of cliche. You had guerrillas, you had paramilitary people, you had this Joseph Conrad Heart of Darkness scenario in general. You had poor children which were suffering. All these, I know all this exists in Colombia. Like the Lisandro Alonso or Lucrecia Martel scenarios exist in Argentina, but they are only one part of the whole image of Argentina or of Colombia. And the other parts are excluded. And if you excluded not from cinema, but from the supported cinema, and from the cinema which has an open door for Cannes or Venice, let's say, for the European market, which is as well the American market, because the American dealers, movie dealers, they see those films in Cannes and in Venice and in Berlin. And if you're successful, like Lucrecia Martel or Lisandro, they will be invited as well to the American streamers, for example, to do a series then, which means a lot of money. And one could observe here a certain kind of what I would call cultural imperialism. Of course, well-meaning, quite often well-meaning, because I know some of those commissioning editors, they are nice people. They're not evil. They, in a way, they are very happy to help Argentinian and Colombian and so on producers and directors to earn some money, to have entrance door to the market. But on the other hand, those commissioning editors have their bosses, the program directors, and they say, okay, in a Colombian movie, we need the narcos, we need the paras, we need the guerrilleros. Yeah, so very simple. If we don't see them, it's not Colombia. It could be anywhere. So I simplicize a bit, but I think you get the idea. And therefore, the filmmakers have this situation. If they want to take the money, they have to fulfill the expectations. And I think that it is less a predominance of economic pressures. It is more a predominance of cultural concepts, because the money, the streamers and the big studios, they will make their money. But if a Colombian filmmaker wants to be part in the system, he or she has to adapt. And of course, it is not just the responsibility of the commissioning editors of the industry. It is as well the responsibility of the filmmakers in Latin America or in Europe or in East Asia, all the non-US of American countries, if they want to fulfill these expectations. And if they want to if they are interested in being part of the world cinema. Big idea, very dangerous term, I think. World cinema is an ideologic term because it means as well mainstream and well-feeling cinema, a little bit exotist, cliché cinema. If they want to fulfill the if they want to be part of those world cinema market, they need to fulfill the expectations, and they have to serve the expectations. And you know that the term serve comes from servant, so they have to be servants. And if they want to be masters, they have to develop, at least parallel, they have to develop a kind of counter public sphere, of counter cinema. You can call it guerrillero cinema. Why not? And here I have to talk about the responsibility of the filmmakers. And I don't know if some of those students listening to us will become filmmakers. I want to address personally on you and to ask you to give me your opinion later about the thing that for me it is a paradox. On the one hand, we all have those small cell phones like this. They are cheap. We can do perfect images, much more perfect than any camera Jean-Luc Godard used to work with. We can have, they don't need much lightning. They are very light. We can go with them in the subway. We can go on the street. We can ask our friends to do a film in our kitchen. Or at night in a bar, or in the jungle, or anywhere else, even where we are not allowed to shoot because no one will realize that we are shooting. So we have all the medias, all the weapons for cinema and cinema needs in our hands. So tell me, why do those films not exist? Where are the many, many Glauber Rogers and all the others of today? Where is the big cinema wave of Latin America and of Europe and of East Asia today, apart from the industry? And I think that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, in the times of Godard and French New Wave and Truffaut and so on, you could say, okay, cinema material is expensive. Cameras are heavy. We need some lightening. It's not so easy. Distribution is very complicated. But today, you don't need money. You have the camera. Distribution is easy. You just put it on YouTube if you don't find someone to give you money. But if you are a genius and you put 3 genial movies on YouTube, you will get the money. I'm quite sure. So what I see as well is that the whole money situation is taken as an excuse for the own cowardice. Many filmmakers are cowards. Many filmmakers are kind of, they are bourgeois. They want to please their parents. They want to do a perfect film. They, of course, in film school, they always learn technical perfection. But go back to Jean-Luc Godard and ask him about technical perfection. He would say, fuck you. I don't care about technical perfection. Technical perfection is something for assholes. Godard literally said, it is about doing a film because you need to do a film. And today, sometimes I have the feeling there are not enough people who need to do a film, need it for artistic or political or social or cultural reasons. They need to do a film for economic reasons, and therefore they do a film in the way it pleases to the economy. And they want to do a film which maybe pleases their parents, that the father, the bankier's father, is very proud and says, okay, you're not a bankier, but at least you do a film which is shown by Hollywood. I think you can do this, and I'm not moralizing, but it should not be the only way to do film, to do cinema. One could as well do a cinema in other ways, and Of course, there's a limitation for the self-exploitation. I'm not saying you should exploit yourself all your life, but maybe when you're students, when you're young and just starting, exploit yourself a little bit and show that you are a genius. And if you show this to the world, then the world will answer. There will be people answering to it. And if it's not Hollywood, there will be people in Europe or somewhere else. And the best example for people working like that is Romania. Eastern European small country. I hope you have heard about it. The Romanian New Wave started in the mid of the 0 years. It won a Golden Palm in 2007. And the Romanian filmmakers, they made a brand out of Romanian cinema. Romanian cinema means it's shot in the apartment, it's shot with small cameras, fast moving, very long films, with hysteric people shouting at each other, living ugly life, always talking about money and about big problems. And it is an image of a society. It's an image of a state of life. It's even an image of a universal situation, which I think is very thrilling, very original, which is quite often great. A movie like Sierra Nevada, some years, I think 2018, is a marvelous film. And another example would be Danish cinema. This is even maybe more useful because Danish cinema, it started, no one knew about any Danish filmmaker. Then this weird pervert guy named Lars von Trier came up and made strange movies. And one accepted him. Okay, there's this strange guy who is of German origin and has a strange, not Danish name, and he is Catholic, so not typical Danish. And so, okay, there's this one weird Dane. Okay. But suddenly in 1995, Lars von Trier, with his friends, founded Dogma 95 movement, which is a movement about how to do cheap films, cheap, ugly films which are technically not very advanced, but how to use the new digital cameras in a way that we filmmakers can make very fast, very successful films which form a label, which form a brand. And suddenly, there were something like 40 Dogma 95 films, which had the label Dogma 95. Most were Danish, not all of them. There was a French film and a German film and so on. And those Dogma films, now it's forgotten. It does not exist anymore, this movement. But people like Lars von Trier, like Susanne Bier, like Søren Kragh Jacobsen, and many more came out of this movement. And the Danish situation now is that we have still auteur cinema from Denmark, like Lars von Trier, like Thomas Vinterberg. We have as well mainstream cinema from Denmark, like Susanne Bier. We have a star from Denmark, like Mads Mikkelsen, who does big Hollywood productions and as well European productions. We have a lot of money in Danish cinema. We have all the European filmmakers longing to make Danish co-productions. We have a boom of Danish TV series, some very good, like Borgen, this political series, a lot of them very bad, but why not? At least people earn money with bad things, and the whole industry flourishes. And we have a very good Danish film school where even German filmmakers, some of the best, went to because they're better than the German film schools. So this comes out of zero, of nothing, in 30 years. So I'm giving these two examples to encourage you Latin American filmmakers, please, complaining is okay, but don't find too many excuses. The film industry is evil, yes, but it has been for 120 years. So you can play, dance with the industry, fine for me. Some of the industry films are marvelous, but if you don't want to do it, there are many ways of slipping around and of doing other ways of films. So this would be my personal humanist message in the spirit of Krakauer, because Krakauer, he studied philosophy and architecture. Then he became a journalist. He was writing novels beside his journalist works, 2 good novels. He was writing studies, sociologist studies. He was one of the most famous journalists in Germany. He had to emigrate because he was a leftist and a Jew when the Nazis came to power. He managed to emigrate with a little luck. And in the US of America, he worked for the government. He made compromises, of course, because he was paid to do this thick book, which is the studies of mass propaganda. Here, maybe you can read it. And totalitarian propaganda. It's in German, but I can send the title to you. I think it's translated to English. So it's very thick, you see, which is not very well known. It is not the Caligari thing. The Caligari is another book. And he was trying to adapt to new, if the circumstances were new, he was trying to adapt. And of course, he was happy to be a professor at the end of his life, the last 15 years. Before, he did not always have a good life. It was more a roller coaster. Famous journalist, suddenly a poor immigrant, which had not enough money to pay for his food. And you can learn from Krakauer as well that, first of all, those conditions don't spoil your mind. You can have a big mind and a free-spirited mind, even when you are poor. And that nothing is for granted. Of course, you can take from Krakauer, but as well, the poverty is not for granted. He later worked for the government, became a professor. You can learn that sometimes you have to do compromises. You have to work for CIA and for government if you need to survive and your money. And like Krakauer as well, Leo Löwenthal did, Herbert Marcuse did. And you can learn that sometimes there is a kind of happy ending in life. And so this would be the second, maybe, humanist message from Krakauer. And the crisis of the film industry, first of all, crisis is a state, is a contemporary state. There's always a crisis. If there's no economic crisis, you have a political crisis, you have a cultural crisis. Crises are in a way needed because we know that animals die when they are not stressed. So stress is a media for evolution, and crisis means big stress for a society. So, of course, I'm not trying to sweet mouth a crisis. I'm not trying to say that existential problems are nothing. But I think that in Europe, where we have welfare state and not, we have crisis, but so-called crisis, no big existential problems so far in the last decades. But we can see that this is not a good situation for art and not a good situation for theory, and that quite often an economically easy situation leads to new political problems, or the very old problems coming back as the comeback of the repressed, which we are living now with the far right rise we have mentioned before. So I think that we have I think that the crisis of the big industry can be ignored by us if we are artists or critics or scientists or journalists, because the crisis on the crisis of the industry is a problem the industry has to solve, and they will not solve it with us. And on the other hand, we cannot stay there and wait for the crisis of the bad guys becoming bigger and bigger, because crisis for the bad guys and for the big industry does not mean that it will be more easy for us, for the citizens, or for social movements and so on. And for sure not for the leftist parties. Because if there is a crisis in the economy, in the big industry, as well in the film industry, they need new scapegoats. And they need someone who is guilty, because they are never guilty. They do everything the right way, at least they pretend to do. So who is the first suffering if there is a crisis of the industry? It is the workers for the industry. But on the other hand, again, we have always, the easiest answer would be, it's dialectics. So each thing which is bad produces something which is good and new chances. And as well, everything which is good produces something unexpected evil. So it's never perfect. But we have the crisis of the film industry, which is the crisis of the cinema industry, to be exact. And the cinema industry is reacting, on the one hand, that it produces global films, because if we don't sell it at home, or if we don't sell it in Latin America, we will sell it to China. And if we don't sell it to China, at least to Latin America, maybe, or to Europe. So this is the logic. And but the smaller films, the more ambitious films, the auteur films from the US of America, of course, they are in a crisis, in a big crisis, because I was mentioning Paul Thomas Anderson, but he's an exception. I was mentioning Martin Scorsese, but he is almost as old as Francis Ford Coppola. But who is coming after them? There is one guy I will recommend to you, because you will hear a lot of him, US-American filmmaker. He is, I think, something like 40 or not even 40. His name is Brady Corbet. He used to be an actor, and he did so far 3 films, and his last film, the third film, has the title The Brutalist, and it won the Directors Award in Venice. And I think as well his 2 films he did before, Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux. I think Vox, I have to check Vox, maybe another, I checked the title. And these 2 films, or the 3 films at all, are auteur cinema, very ambitious, very interesting, not typical American filmmaking, but with big stars, and in some ways, movies for the masses, movies which sell and have a bigger audience. But he did those films with no money, comparably, no money at all. The Brutalist, with big Hollywood stars like Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody in it, and others. This film did cost all in all $10 million. Forget 10 millions for a Hollywood filmmaker. Yeah, even when you don't pay 1 million for the stars, and when they maybe work for free, you just need the money for the costs of the film. And he did shoot his film in Hungary, but the film is set in Pennsylvania. So he built up America in Hungary. As years ago, Anthony Minghella, British filmmaker in the US, he did Coldback Mountain was the title, I think, or no, some American Civil War film he did shoot in Romania. It means there is good cinema, but it is apart from the industry. And so one chance is to work with much less money, but you are free. And one other chance, of course, is called the internet. It means the streamers again. The streamers are very mainstream. I don't like the streamers. Of course, I watch certain series, but I don't like them. But each one out of 100 will be a great series like Stranger Days, for example. And yesterday, just by chance, I watched one thing of Stranger Days, just 45 minutes or 50 by chance. from the first part, and I thought, again, it's genius, it's great, and you want to see more and more, but it was too late and I had to go to bed. But anyway, the streamers are evil, they are the devil, they are hell, but they are paradise as well, and they give you big chances. So the landscape is very device. And one cannot speak about the industry and the crisis. One has to be, we have to be brave enough to allow diversity as well in our look to the world. And I think we can see many chances there. As I said before, we are living in times of the visual turn. So let's be visual and let's make visual images and let's communicate in a visual way. So I'm not sure I answered your questions, but these would be some.
Of course. Well, really thank you so much for this amazing, exciting, above all analysis. Yes, and with those emerging technologies, on the one hand, we have the audiences of streamers like Mr. Beast, a streamer who has over 3,000 million followers and producing billions of dollars and partnerships from all of the wings from political parties. And still, it seems like there are a lot of challenges to take on with courage and imagination, or in order to build hope. I would love to send you on a later occasion some films by a great independent director from Colombia who worked with Werner Herzog. His name is Luis Ospina. He has many of these other ways of making films, very different from cliches. On the other hand, here in 2020 and 2022, we have we had a student explosion against a government that used violence to repress students. Paradoxically, he has my same last name, but we are not familiar family. But young people and the population of a society movement that wanted to move forward in the peace processes and wanted to go beyond those cliches that sometimes entrench the elites in our identity, because by achieving recipes, they can control their population more. This allows me to move on to the next question. But I found that you was responded our this question before, but only for explore more. There have been many attempts to construct alternatives to a montage based on fantasies that project false ideals. For example, the value of Einstein's cinema of Godard that you mentioned before, whose theories of montage propose alternatives to syntax of Hollywood's fantastic cinema, or also Alexander Kluge's and your own thesis on the alternative histories of cinema. One of the motives for this conversation that we feel some emotions seeing your films. What other directors of films do you consider contribute to the construction of these alternatives and to find ways to note historical consciousness, to build alternatives to industrial cinema and to this narrative, giving another place to audiovisual images in our lives and our processes?
Okay. Yeah, in part I answered it already. I was mentioning the Romanian cinema. I was mentioning the history of Dogma 95 of the Danish movement. And I think these are ways to learn how to do, let's say, alternatives to industrial cinema. One has maybe to as well to mention that it is very hard to form an alternative which is totally away from industry cinema. It is more a diversity. It is more an alternative inside of the cinema, the industrial cinema. Because very simple, it is not, filmmakers are artists, but they are not artists in the way a poet is an artist. Because a poet can sit at home and write the poetry. Very simple, yeah. But it's film is produced in a different way. Not even when there is a kind of captain of the ship, but there is more labor division. I have to check what is the exact term, but I think it would be labor division, or yeah, division of labor, division of work. So film is produced in this way. Even when, of course, there is a captain, there is the boss, or for sure two bosses, usually the director as the artistic boss and the producer as the economic boss. And due to this, in a way, as well, to this reason, cinema is the most modern art. It is the true modern art form, because modernity means this division of work. It means network society. It is not as simplicist individualism as it used to be. Of course, we are all individuals, but we are individuals made by a system, formed by a family, by a society, by the conditions of our working, our production, by political conditions, and so on and so on. We all know this, and cinema is the art, and film is the art which reflects this process as the closest. And therefore, as well, we have in cinema, we have films which connect different ways of filmmaking, like a mix between documentary and fiction. Like a mix between essayist approach and a more observatory approach. We have as well the idea that a film, which is still a very young idea, very brave, very avant-gardist idea, that a film does not tell the story of a person. Usually we have this very classical idea of a subject, or maybe 2, 3, 4 subjects, and certain things are happening to them. They are falling in love, or they are into a war, or something like this. And of course, a mix of those events, and we share a part of their way in the life in a chronological order from A to B to C with them. So the classical approach is the approach of the classical novel, like War and Peace by Tolstoy, for example. And this, or even more like Goethe, the elective family, and stories like that. Wahlverwandtschaften would be in the German term, and the so-called, I will check as well how to translate a very German word, which is Bildungsroman. I'm not sure we can translate it, but I'm checking this. The Bildungsroman is kind of coming of age novel, but not really. It is Bildungsroman is in my English webpage as well, Bildungsroman, so I cannot help you. The general idea is that we have a human being in the center of the story, and this human being will change. In movies, of course, most movies are a kind of continuation of the novel with other means, with the cinematic means. But real avant-gardist cinema would be something else. It would be, for instance, a film which tells not a story of a person, but a story of an object. Like we have in Weimar cinema, a film which tells the journey of a 10 mark piece of money, of a money note, of a banknote. This film is destroyed. We only have 1 minute extract. So unfortunately, I cannot show you this film. But it is a marvelous idea because the money travels through the hands of different persons. And so we meet different persons and we don't stay with those persons. The persons are not the main characters. The money is the main character. And of course, this shows something about society. What is the main topic of society? It's the money and what the money does with the people, and not the other way. The people have big plans, and with the money they pay for the plans, and maybe they fail or they will be fulfilled. So it's a turnaround of perspective. As well, there was in Soviet cinema of the 20s, you are mentioning Eisenstein. By the way, the name is written incorrectly. One N less, the first N less, the name is Eisenstein. But just a short remark. Besides Eisenstein, his big comrade was Vertov, Dziga Vertov. And Dziga Vertov, who as well is the name giver of a very famous group where Godard used to make films for some years, Dziga Vertov group, and then he was almost at the nervous breakdown because he had discussed each shoot with everyone, and he was no longer Godard. But this is another story. But Dziga Vertov wanted to do a film, and together with Eisenstein and others, to film The Capital, the book of Marx. So a non-fiction book, how to film a non-fiction book. In a way, it is not possible. You have how to film theory, but just the thought about it, this idea is great, I think. And Alexander Kluge, which you are mentioning here as well, he did a kind of fulfillment of this Dziga Vertov idea, because he did a film called, I think the exact title is in translation, How to Film the Capital. And he took a lot of old, it's more an essayist or more reportage movie. He took old footage of the Soviet times of the 20s and as well of former times. For instance, he was showing working process in Fordism factories in Chicago and so on. But he was as well showing images of the revolution in Russia. And then he is connecting this with some part of Vertov's and Eisenstein's films and connecting it with a lot of interviews with theorists and with artists who give their opinion on certain questions which Kluge is asking them. And Kluge as well, you know him as a filmmaker, I'm quite sure. But do you know as well that he did TV? He had a kind of his own TV channel for the last 30 years. And you know, Kluge is still alive. I would recommend to all of us listening to this to think about and to watch Alexander Kluge's movies and as well his work, his recent work, because he is still alive. And I did a meeting with him in April this year. It was a video, a Zoom meeting, but a public talk, where we were talking about Europe and Napoleon Bonaparte, because Napoleon Bonaparte, in a way, is the founder of the first European Union. Of course, it was a Bonapartist union, but okay, now we have a neoliberal union. Why not have a Bonapartist union? So, and he was coming out of the French Revolution and had a lot of progressive ideas, of course, giving in a kind of dictator approach to the world, but at least progressive ideas. And for Germany, he was very good, I think. He revolutionized Germany because the Germans were not able to do the French thing and kill their kings. And in this time, so the task for Kluge was, okay, what do you think? Because he wrote a book on Napoleon Bonaparte. And I was asking him, okay, what do you think about Napoleon and the idea of Europe? It was some weeks before the European election, parliamentary elections. And Kluge said, well, my answer would be, not an argument, not a talk, but my answer would be films. And I will produce 3 films for you. And believe it or not, Kluge was making within 2 days 3 films. Each film is some minutes long, between 5 and I think almost 10 minutes. So altogether it was something like 20 minutes show. And then we had a talk. And those films he made with AI. He was, I don't know how, but he was telling his AI, and I think he has assistants helping him, but it was so fast. I was admiring it because we had the talk and 2 days later I had the movies. Maybe he had one of them prepared because he loves Napoleon. And of course, in his head, he had prepared a lot, but he did it. So AI as well is an alternative, not mentioned before, alternative to industrial filmmaking, because AI is a product made by the industry to replace the industry. This is the weird dialectics of capitalism. I think AI, of course, is a threat for all of us, and maybe we will have the Terminator 2 scenario, and the Terminator, the machines will come to kill us all and rule in peace without the humans, which disturb the peace of the machines. But so far, we can try to use the machines. And I think AI we have, of course, to find our way, and AI is too new to know all the answers. But at least we should ask AI questions, and we should not shrink back and shy back of AI and say, this is evil, industry, evil, digitalization, let's go back to nature and talk with the bees and with the butterflies. No, maybe ask the AI for the most beautiful butterfly and it will produce it. And then we can talk to the artificial butterfly. And then go out to nature. Of course, for me, it's not this or that, it's this and that. So AI, with the example of Alexander Kluge, who is after Godard, or together with Godard, these are the 2 youngest filmmakers. Godard is dead, but he's still alive in not just my heart. And Alexander Kluge as well, he is a very young filmmaker with his almost 93 years old. And he still did 3 films this year. I'm sure he did more. So he is very creative. But he does not try to be nostalgic and reactionary and to do just a movie in the style of Vertov and Eisenstein, or in the style of Godard and the Kluge of the 60s. He wants to be the Kluge of the 2024, better of 2025 already, of the future. And he wants to do films of the future, which, of course, have all the spirit of him. Kluge studied with Adorno. Kluge was assistant of Fritz Lang. So he has all in himself, but he is kind of use it in a creative way in the direction of the future and not in the direction backwards. So this would be my idea of alternatives to cinema. And this, of course, goes as well to the alternative histories of cinema. If you, of course, history of cinema, let me think of Godard, of his Histoire du Cinéma. I think this is one of the most progressive movies of the last decades. We can learn not just a lot about cinema and its history, we can learn as well about how to make a movie and how to use the already existing cinema, the images of cinema, how to use them in a new way, in a creative way, because it is all about montage. It is all about recombination of images. In a way, you all know Jorge Luis Borges, and his idea of the infinite library. There is as well one could say there is an infinite photography archive. There is an infinite image archive. It already exists. We all are not able just to see 10% percentage of all the images already existing. So, of course, we can make new images, but I'm quite sure that most of us, we all have a smartphone, we all do selfies, we photograph our lover, the great spots where we visit, the images of Mona Lisa and other great paintings in the museum. We photograph our breakfast. These images are not original. We have less to find new images and maybe more look into the archives and find the unseen images, the not found images, the repressed images. We have to find a lot. We have to look for. So in all, and you mentioned Sokurov, the Russian filmmaker. He did as well a movie about the Louvre and the French Paris Museum, and about the images of the Louvre surviving the German Nazi occupation. So as well, it is not just about the archivists, the people working in the archive, that sometimes it is very good to hide the images and to put the images in a cellar or in a secret store to keep them safe. What as well this film is telling us is that still today, something like 90% of the images, the paintings which are in the Louvre, are not shown because the Louvre is not big enough. And so the most important thing would be to go into the archives and find all the things which are not shown and recombine them. And I think as a political tool, for sure in Europe, I guess as well in Latin America, one very important thing is to make the archives public, like a public library, as well to make the archives of the film industry, of the film museum, they are public, but of the TV channels. What is with the Colombian TV channels and all the material they produced since, let's say, the 50s or the 60s? Much of them is already paid by public funding, so it belongs to the people. And I'm quite sure there's no free access for it, because I think there are 2 or 3 countries where they have free access to it. One is the Netherlands. From the Netherlands, we can learn that it is possible, as well technically possible, because usually the big guys say, yeah, we would want to do it, but technically it's so complicated. And it's so expensive. No, it's not expensive, it's not complicated. And one could, first of all, make a list of, let's say, 10 or 20 things they have to fulfill in the way that it has to have a title and a date and some informations. And then one could easily give students a student job, which is paid, but not big paid, but at least it's paid fairly, and to let them bring all the TV material into public archives and to build a tool for public archive and free for each citizen, or to do something like crowdfunding. There are many ways to do it, like a flat rate that you pay, I don't know, in Germany it would be something like 10 euros a month you would pay, and therefore you have access for all. And you are obliged, even those people who have no computer and say, I don't want to pay for this shitty, lying public TV, they are forced to pay. And then we have enough money. So these would be some practical ideas. I can go on. Did I answer all questions? Alternatives to cinema, another place for audiovisual images in our lives and cultural process. This is that. Alternative history of cinema. It would be an interesting thought if we could write. Yeah, there's one thing I want to tell as well. Okay, it is a bit too complicated to find. Of course, there are alternative histories of cinema. I think in general, economics is very important, but I would always come back to Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte is he has said a very famous sentence when he was meeting with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the German writer, in 1806 when he conquered Germany. And he said, they had a conversation, and one sentence, which is clear, Napoleon said it, is, in German, Politik ist das Schicksal. So politics is fate. But in the meaning that politics is the sense of history. And remember, we have the time of Hegel, of the German philosopher, as well with Napoleon, when Hegel had this idea of the world spirit, which is more or less the sense of history, and that this world spirit is incorporated in certain people, like Napoleon Bonaparte. For him, it was the Weltgeist zu Pferde, the world spirit on a horse, Napoleon. So I'm saying this because 100 years later, a German industrialist who was as well a philosopher, Walter Rathenau, he was foreign minister in the Weimar Republic. He was murdered because he was leftist industrialist and too progressive, and he was a Jew. Therefore, he was murdered by fascists in the Weimar Republic. It's in my film on Caligari. There's a very short thing because it is the biggest funeral in German history up to today. So Walter Rathenau, he wrote in an essay, economy is fate. Wirtschaft ist das Schicksal. So he was obviously countering Napoleon. He was saying, no, Napoleon, you are wrong. Now we live in Marxist and Max Weberian national economic times. Economy is more important. Okay, so now 100 years later, I would counter Walter Rathenau. I would say, no, economy is not the fate. So it is cultural and politics is the fate. Maybe culture as well. Culture in a very broad sense, where culture is not just the arts, for sure, and is not just what we call cultural identity today in the identity politic pattern, but culture as well as in the way that politics, if we want to understand them, we have to understand that political choices and political fashions, let's put it this, are made by cultural patterns and by milieu. I would come to Pierre Bourdieu and this whole theory of culture, the function of culture in society, and that the milieus, the cultural spheres, in a way form decisions and form the thought approach in which we approach to politics. And as well that that if we think about Max Weber, when he was writing about religion, for him, religion was a cultural thing. It is not about which God you believe in, whatever. It is about that if you grew up in a religious sphere, in a sect, or in a religious group, or you belong to a certain church, with this belief and with this religious system, as well, a cultural system is implanted in yourself, in your brain, in your genes. So, in a way, as well for Max Weber, many decisions were governed by cultural patterns. And you know, maybe his famous essay about Protestant ethics and the birth of capitalism. This is exactly the idea. He said capitalism came out of a cultural Protestant pattern. So all these ideas come together to my approach that maybe one should write a history of cinema, not about political ideologies in cinema and not about economic pressure or things which happen and the conditions of production, and more about cultural patterns which govern the cinema, which govern as well the way cinema is made by the filmmakers and is distributed by the industry and by the cinemas and so on, and now TV channels, streamings, but as well how it is perceived by the audience, which is quite often a mass audience, but not always. And if we talk about this as well, if we talk about politics and economics, but more about politics and even more about culture, we have to talk about one thing we have not mentioned so far, but it is very important, and I know you all agree, which is the term propaganda. Propaganda, if we understand it as a way of how to sell politics, in a way about PR of politics and ideology, of course, but not necessary ideology as well. I was talking about the cultural, the social ecological transformation. The governments, if they want to convince the citizens, which are the audience of politics, if they want to convince the citizens, they have to sell their ideas. And how do? They do it with small PR clips where they just explain why this social ecological transformation is necessary. And they explain, don't have fear, it's not a threat, ecology is important, we all love nature, therefore we need more electric cars and less classic fuel cars, and so on and so on. And of course, one could describe this in the nice way. It is an information clip. Just good informations by good, well-meaning politicians who want enlightened citizens and who want to enlighten them. But of course, I could as well describe it as in terms of propaganda. Just it's a propaganda for a good thing, because I agree on this ecological transformation and don't deny climate change and all that. And it is a propaganda to sell and to sell politics, and of course to brainwash some of the stupid citizens. And maybe if we send children to school, it's nothing else than to brainwash the children. And we think it's very good if they learn how to write and if they learn mathematics. And in learning how to write and mathematics, they learn as well a little bit about natural science, and they learn a little bit about history of the country and so on. So they are enlightened, but maybe as well brainwashed, because they would prefer to play on the playground and beat up their friends. So, and they learn not to do it. So it's about education. And for me, it is very difficult to draw a clear line between good education here and bad propaganda there. I think the boundaries are fluent and very flexible. So I would argue that we have to think more about propaganda for the one reason of course, to understand it, but to understand it, to fight propaganda, to look through it, to be enlightened over this part of enlightenment process. But on the other hand, as well, to use the means, because we all know good, decent filmmakers of the past who did a lot of propaganda for sometimes a very good reason, sometimes a little bit less good reasons. Eisenstein, what is about Eisenstein? He did propaganda for the Russian Revolution, for selling the Soviet model. And in a way, he was selling some very good things, but as well, he was selling Stalin. And is Alexander Nevsky, which is a metaphor for Stalin, is this a film about, is this a propaganda movie or not? I'm not sure. So this is one thing, and of course we could talk about Jean-Luc Godard, who did propaganda for the revolution, which did never happen, for being critical citizen. He did propaganda for us to be friends for Palestine. He did propaganda against fascism, of course. So maybe some of those ideas are very good propaganda. But they are propaganda. And I think one could easily show that they're using the means of propaganda cinema, but it is very hard to explain, even if we would analyze those films, to explain when does evil propaganda start and good propaganda finishes. For instance, you all know the filmmaker from the famous Nazi filmmaker, Leni Riefenstahl. Here is as well a book on her and her image. She did Triumph of the Will and later Olympia. You can watch those films on YouTube, but be very careful if you watch the right version and not the edited version. And some versions are edited by Nazis, some versions are edited by Leni Riefenstahl, who was kind of a Nazi until the end of her life. But as well, you know maybe that famous scenes of Triumph of the Will are copied in The Lion King, the Disney animation film. And they are copied in Star Wars, in the first George Lucas film, Star Wars, you all know. Now it's number 4, but it was the number 1 in 1977. The ending looks like Triumph of the Will. So, and no one objects to this observation. So what does this tell us? Does this tell us that what we always knew, Hollywood is fascist, Star Wars is a fascist movie, Lion King is evil, brainwashing, and hidden fascism to brainwash the children? Or is it the other way around? Maybe the media are much more neutral. The techniques and the images are much more neutral, and they can be used, of course, to propagate fascism, but as well to propagate some cheesy family values in The Lion King. And last not least, I hope you all, as well the students, all know about the Kuleshov effect, which is a very famous effect used in Soviet film montage technique, because it's all about montage. And Riefenstahl, by the way, was a very good montage film editor. The Kuleshov effect means that an image, if you connect an image of a face which has no expression at all, you connect once with a baby and once with food and once with dead people killed in the war in a very brutal way, we will interpret the same face in 3 different ways. One, oh, how nice, caring person for the baby. One's kind of greedy for the food, hungry or whatever, and one time evil, awfully kind of frightened by the war and shocked by the dead bodies. So I think there are more advanced Kuleshov effects in terms of propaganda. The techniques of and the body image of Olympia, for example, the sports film by Riefenstahl, can be used, I think, for fascists, we know, but as well for Roosevelt New Deal idea of workers' sports, and as well for Stalinist new Soviet bodies, or even Leninist new Soviet bodies. So I'm not denying that Riefenstahl was a Nazi. She was paid by the Nazis. She did not work for Roosevelt or for Stalin, but her images are not paid. Her images can be used. They are techniques. So, okay, these are some remarks.
Sure. And the next question you also respond that what tools we can teach there in schools, and in addition to that, I think it would be a good opportunity to promote laws on visual education, probably in Latin America and European schools also. What do you think about it? Could you teach us about it?
Yes, well, I think first of all, one should have audiovisual education classes in general. and from a very early age, because children as well with 5, 6 years old, they want, or even younger, they want to play with smartphones, and they know how to use a screen sometimes better than their parents. And they should learn, I think that young people are quite aware that images are lying anyway, that images are not the truth. But as the techniques of lying with images are progressing every day, one have to keep track, and one have to show them, to educate them. For instance, one can, this was what I just said about the Kuleshov effect. This is something one could tell very young audiences. And one could tell, on the one hand, I think film history is important, that as well, the different ways cinema can be, what can cinema be, all these alternatives. One could teach them, and of course different genres like essay film, like documentary, like fiction. And I don't agree to the opinion that documentary is the same like a fiction film. Many people think that today. I think at least, of course, a documentary is produced as well with techniques and from a subjective perspective. And it is never objectively true. But on the other hand, a documentary pretends to be true. And this pretension is the important thing. And okay, I think we are kind of fighting against a big flood, and maybe our dam is not high enough, but we should at least try to educate in history and in the diversity. We should definitely explain why Hollywood is not all, why Hollywood is not the truth, why Hollywood is for sure, as well, the storytelling of Hollywood and the dramaturgy of Hollywood is just one way to do filmmaking, a very good way, and maybe as well a way which is very close to human nature. And some of the concepts of other filmmakers are maybe great concepts and very interesting, and I love their films, but they are less easy to be consumed because they are less close to human nature. And I don't think that human nature, it should be close to human nature, or human nature is the pattern. But I think that we have to be aware that some things work very easy and others don't. And therefore, those things who work very easy, they should be deciphered better. We should have a closer look on the things which work very easy, because they are less easy to be deciphered. They seem to be natural. And so I think this kind of criticism of ideologies, this would be the term by Marx, Ideologiekritik, this should be a part of this education. And on the other hand, of course, to encourage the children to make movies, to work something from themselves with their smartphone. It will be amazingly what is coming out of it, and because it is fun for them. If you give them a smartphone to film themselves and to tell stories with their friends, even 6-year-old children or 7 or 8-year-old, they will develop amazing images first, and second, and these, by the way, these will enlighten us grown-ups as well. It will tell us grown-ups a lot about children feel and what they fear, what they hope for, and all that. And on the other hand, it is very important that that the children, when they film themselves, they will realize how difficult it is to make a film. They will realize which problems come up. And just to edit the film and they will easily, in a natural way, understand what are technical problems for filmmakers and why images are looking how they look. And if they look at the film made by another person, they will see the technique, they will see the tricks, they will look through, so they will be more enlightened. And so this is what a class for visual education can bring. And in universities, for the older ones, I think, to be honest, I think the most important is to watch many films. Even if you want to become a filmmaker, watch other films. And not on the computer screen or on the cell phone, but in cinema. Watch it together, watch it in peace, in a concentrated viewing situation, and they have to be forced to watch. In my opinion, the test for filmmakers to enter a film school, it would be very easy. I would hand out them a list of 100 films, at least, maybe 200 films. And they will need 1 year to prepare to see all the films. And it will be very clear that by chance, some of those 200 films, we will ask them about the content and about certain scenes, just to check if they have seen it. And this would be the best preparation. They don't need to do an essay why they will want to become filmmakers, which filmmakers they prefer, or do they know what a camera wide-angle shot is, or all this shit stuff. They have to learn. And if they don't learn it, maybe they will become the most creative filmmakers.
Maybe for high levels.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you very much for this extraordinary interview. It was very, very complete. It was very, very complete. And we are really, really exciting and thankful with you. Well, we thank everyone for their presence and participation, especially Mr. Suchsland, who generously accepted our invitation and shared such important reflections on visual education. We invite everyone to the open meetings of the Historiography Committee and Cinema Committee, which are always held on the last Saturday of the month at the same time. We would also like to remind to you follow the network's general Instagram, a proposal of social networks, which has several amazing committees and an unmissable agenda of events. Those who wish to know more about Red LEHA and follow the official processes and calls through the networks. Those who wish to collaborate with the Historiography Committee and Cinema Committee, follow the communications through the Linktree or contact us by email. Thank you so much and hasta la próxima. Muchas gracias.